So with the closed alpha of Back 4 Blood over, I thought now would be a good time to really give my overall summary of what I thought about the game so far, looking at both the good and the bad parts of it. And after sitting here rewriting this video, I'll be honest, I absolutely love this game. It's great, there's a lot of fun to be had with it and it nails the type of game I've been looking for. I'm a massive fan of co-op horde based shooters and I've really been wanting something that I could really sink my teeth into for a long time now, as currently I tend to jump around from game to game. They're all a lot of fun, but nothing has really kept my attention for too long. Sure, I have games that I come back to every now and then, but Back 4 Blood is the first game in a long time that's given me this impression that has just made me want to keep coming back to it. To a point where I'd be lying if I didn't admit I was a little bit disappointed that I had to go to work while the alpha was live. To say I like Back 4 Blood is definitely a bit of an understatement. Now, this doesn't mean I'm blindly in love with it. While I had a lot of fun with the alpha, there's definitely a few issues with it, and towards the end I want to talk about my biggest concern with it, which I can imagine going from most people's reactions, you can guess what I'm going to discuss. The alpha is what I'd consider to be a bit of a bite-sized chunk of the full game. It doesn't offer a whole lot and definitely keeps a few aspects of the game in the dark, like the versus mode, but for the most part it definitely does enough. The alpha consisted of one act of one of the campaigns from the final game and can roughly last up to an hour depending on what difficulty you go with. The difficulty in this game can make a major jump, with classic feeling more familiar to players for Left 4 Dead, with ammo being rather generous and also allowing the player to go down twice before dying, while the other two difficulties make enemies a lot harder, increase the friendly fire and also remove downs entirely, so if you die, you just die, and you either have to be revived by a defibrillator or cut down later on in the level. Personally, I like the survivor mode best because it gives a more balanced challenge between classic and the harder mode. However, there's one aspect of this game that wasn't really explained and I think is rather important. In Back 4 Blood, health can be lost. Permanently. Kind of. It might be better if I explain this. So when you take damage in the game, you have 3 layers to your health bar: white, red and black. White represents your current health, red represents the health you've lost from taking damage but can still recover by either using medkits or a bandage, and the black void where your health used to be is what the game likes to call trauma damage. Trauma damage occurs once the player takes enough damage that your overall max health is reduced, meaning if you choose to heal with an item, you can only recover what's in the red. Whatever's lost to trauma doesn't come back unless you find a health station that's normally located behind a locked door that you can't open unless you have a toolkit on you. They make an entire video player before the game starts and not once did they think to mention this. The amount of times my friends got confused trying to figure out why one of us was only at max like 60 HP was quite irritating, and we had to basically figure it out ourselves. Whenever you start a game, you'll start what's called a run. Back 4 Blood has a sort of roguelike element chucked into the game, and while I'm not entirely sure what the run does itself, I can tell you that the card mechanic is definitely one of the better parts of this game. Each rundown you get to choose a few cards from your deck alongside a loadout card that is always given to you at the start of the game. Now this could be for a weapon or for one of the other various cards that the game has to offer. It could be for health on melee, start with a shotgun, or it could just be to buff your health when you're healing others. The game has a fair amount to play around with so far, and I've ended up making a deck that made it play like Left 4 Dead, so taking improved accuracy, movement speed, and also infinite ammo for the secondary at the cost of no longer being able to aim down sights or be able to run. The trade-offs here are fun, but it only scratches the surface of potential these cards have. The one downside so far is that in the alpha, the game always chooses the same few mutation cards, so we never really saw the variety in a run, which is a shame since I can see this being the main gimmick of the replay value, if it's done well. I can't say for sure since we don't really know anything about the mutation cards outside what we've already seen, but what I do know is that the firearms in this game feel absolutely great. I really can't knock them. They feel powerful, they sound great, and are a lot of fun to use. What makes them even more interesting is that throughout the campaign you can upgrade weapons slightly by either discovering attachments scattered around the level, or by using copper that you've acquired through the level you can buy attachments in the shop and the safe house. I guess my only real nitpicks for this would be the questionable ammo count for certain weapons. Even with the extended mag upgrades they can feel a little bit low, especially with the RPK, and also weapons like the M1 have an incredibly slow fire rate. Or that the upgrade menu seems a little bit generic and makes it hard to tell if you're upgrading your primary or your secondary. But if firearms aren't for you, you'll also get a few melee weapons you can swing around, and I'll be blunt here, they really don't feel that good. It feels like there's a bit of a delay between certain melee weapons and you will cancel mid-swing if you hit an enemy. They changed this with the machete towards the end of the alpha and that makes things a hell of a lot better, but I think the entire melee system needs a complete overhaul. Another thing as well is that you get a heavy swing which you need a card to activate, which for a weapon like the fire axe is crucial, so if you don't get that card in a run, that weapon's entirely useless.
Need this.
Okay.
Thank you.
This guy on the...
Give me a minute.
Did you hear that noise that Hocker just made?
Yeah, it was
On my
weird.
head, I just heard it go, oh.
You know.
When it comes to the special infected, from what we've seen so far, the majority of them look pretty cool, but the majority of them did have a few issues. The biggest pain in the ass was the Hocker. A Hocker can leap around the map and trap players in their place, causing them to stand still and basically do nothing. This alone isn't the problem. The issue here is that firstly, the Hocker can just get you regardless of where it's placed, and more importantly, once you're pinned, you just can't do anything. It's not like a hunter where you're physically pinned down, the goo is at your feet. You could stand and still fight while a teammate comes to help, like in the trailer, but instead you just kind of stand there awkwardly. The ogre is a bit of a weird one. On paper it sounds brilliant, a giant enemy who follows you and tries to kill you, and in the gameplay trailer they made him look rather threatening, but when you actually see him in game, he's pretty underwhelming. He'll either get stuck and not be able to follow you, or he'll just randomly leave if one player gets too far. He's super easy to avoid and feels a bit too scripted, making him a less worthwhile enemy. I think if they made the world a bit more destructible so it worked around him so he could follow you through the map, it would make his appearance much more impactful and much more terrifying. Finally, there's the tall boy. He's surprisingly quick and can pack quite a punch, and if you're not careful, whenever he swings at you, he'll either send you flying or just full on kill you on the spot. His weak point is his club, which itself is fine and makes sense, but due to the quick movement and his animation set, at points trying to take him down is a lot harder than it should be. And when playing on higher difficulties, trying to kill one of the many the game will throw at you pretty much drains your ammo entirely. And I should note, I don't mean throughout the campaign, I mean at one single time. The director has this fascination with throwing multiple tall boys at you at one time, especially towards the finale. Speaking of the director, I noticed within the alpha how underutilized its potential is. So from what I can gather, the main aspects of the game director's power are in the placement of weapons, equipment, locked doors and enemies. And for the most part it does this pretty well. Sometimes it can be a bit unfair, but it is an alpha, it's kind of expected. But something you don't really see is an alternative layout. Now in Left 4 Dead 1, this wasn't really a thing the director did, but it was something the sequel started to push for. Depending on how well the player was doing in a map, the world would change around it so the path would either make the progression easier or harder. Even in Left 4 Dead 2, this was an aspect of the game that was overlooked, but I feel like this would have been a perfect time to reintroduce it. But I think if you consider some of the special infected in this game, especially the ogre, having an alternative path would make them much more exciting because you might not be used to it. For example, in the first level, why not make it so the director can choose to break the bridge connecting to the other building at the start, so the survivors have to find an alternative route to the safe house which could lead them down to the back alleys and streets. It would be nice because it brings more life into the map, but more importantly, it brings variety. And this leads me on to the final concern I have about Back 4 Blood, and that's the price. Back 4 Blood is currently available for pre-order on Steam for around £50 for the standard edition, £80 for the deluxe, and £90 for the ultimate edition. Which in my opinion, from what we know currently, is a bit too expensive. It's clear that with the backing from Warner Brothers, this game is being treated like a AAA title, which is fine, as long as we know how much content there is going to be at launch. What concerns me however is the game is also offering an annual pass at pre-order, meaning they're probably aiming for this game to last a while, with new characters, enemies, cars and campaigns being planned for post-launch, and with Turtle Rock's history on Evolve, you can't blame people for getting concerned about all of this. I think the best way for them to justify the price of this game is by giving a bit of context on what's going to be offered at launch. How many campaigns are there going to be? How in depth is the versus? Is there going to be a survival mode? Is there any chance of modding support? Because if this game has most of its content blocked behind a paywall, it's going to turn the majority of people away, and I really don't want that to happen. I want Back 4 Blood to do well, it's a lot of fun and I can see myself playing it for a very long time. However, if they take the route of Evolve, we're just going to see it fall on its face in a couple of months. Now we know there's going to be a beta for this game down the line and I'll be sure to follow up this video, but until then, I am curious, what are your thoughts on Back 4 Blood? What do you want to see from Back 4 Blood? And finally, do you think this game could be successful enough for Valve to get their arse in gear and finally make Left 4 Dead 3? Or hell, I'd take a VR game at this point.